Hi everybody, today we're going to do a little review on a real budget dive watch. It's the Casio MDV 102-1AV and it's called the C Analog Illuminator, and sometimes you hear it referred to as a Super Illuminator, which is right on the dial there in red. This is another watch I'd categorize as low cost and high value. I've owned this watch for a little over 2 years, and originally I paid only about $50 for the watch. I think I got it on Amazon.com. But yeah, that's about the price of a night out at the movies if you factor in a few popcorns and some soda pop. So didn't really cost very much. Unfortunately, this watch has been discontinued by Casio and it's only available on the secondary market now. But if you look around, you can find these new or new in the box or like new in the box on places like eBay, and still at a pretty good price. So let's talk a little bit about size and weight. The watch is about 42 millimeters in diameter across the case, not counting the crowns. And if we include the time setting crown at 3 o'clock here, it's about 45 millimeters. It's about 12 millimeters thick, so it's not a terribly thick watch, which is good. Lug width is about 20 millimeters, so it'll take a lot of standard size straps and even some bracelets. And the weight on this watch, as shown here with an aftermarket strap, is about 3.1 ounces or 88 grams. So it's not very heavy on the wrist either. So two good features. It's not very tall and it's not very heavy. Let's talk about construction. It's mostly polished stainless steel. You notice there's a lot of shiny bits on the watch, including the case back, the bottom of the lugs, the sides of the lugs. About the only part that's brushed is the top of the lugs. You can see here. Otherwise, it's pretty well polished finish. It does have a screw down crown here at 3 o'clock for time setting, and it also has a screw down case back, which takes a standard lugged case back removal wrench. I see you can see my reflection in the watch back. It's a little bit eerie. By the way, it's about 20 degrees out here today, so that's why I have gloves on. It's a little bit chilly. Has a unidirectional 60-minute timing bezel, as would be typically found on a dive watch. It's 2 clicks per minute, so 120 total clicks to get all the way around the dial. The bezel, you'll notice it slopes down, has a sloping geometry to it that transitions from the domed crystal down to the case. So it's a very nice, very pleasing transition to the eye. I like that. It does have a domed mineral crystal, which is nice to look at. It's aesthetically appealing, but it does introduce a little distortion if you're trying to read the time off at an angle. You'll notice if I turn the watch off at an angle like this, it becomes kind of hard to read time. It has luminous treatment on the hands and markers. On my example here, it's not super bright, but we'll see why that isn't important in a minute, or as important, I guess. Date windows at 4 o'clock. It's black numerals on white background. The water resistance is 200 meters, so it's good for use in a true diving watch fashion. And this model originally came with a resin strap, which I took off almost immediately, and I've replaced that with a kevlar strap, which I kind of like myself. It has the white stitching on a black strap, which is kind of a nice contrast to match the color combinations of the watch. I've also added a little compass on the strap. That's more for topside use than underwater use. I tend to wear this watch when I go out on hikes, and having that little compass on there helps me remember what direction I'm going or which direction I came from. The movement in this watch is a Casio quartz 3304 module. Don't know a lot about the specs on that particular module. It is spec'd at plus or minus 20 seconds per month. I think that's a very conservative specification, and I'm sure it includes maximum temperature variation for the watch. I doubt that that quartz module is temperature compensated. On this particular example, I typically see accuracy more in the neighborhood of plus or minus 1 second per month. So again, I think the module specification is quite conservative. It uses a CR 2016 lithium primary cell for a battery, and it's spec'd at 3 years typical life. I'm sure that will vary a lot depending on how much you use the Illuminator function, which we'll talk about next. This has the original battery in it, and as I've said, this watch is going on a little over 2 years old now, so still functioning quite well. So let's talk about the Illuminator, which is how this watch got its name. You'll notice there's a big crown up here at 2 o'clock, and that's actually a push button which actuates the illumination function on the watch. And the Illuminator consists of 2 LEDs, light emitting diodes. There's one at 12 o'clock and one at 6 o'clock, and they're white LEDs, and they do quite a good job of lighting up the dial. You can't really see it out here in the daylight, but I'll do a dark shot for you so you can see what it looks like in the dark. When you depress this button at 2 o'clock, the illumination comes on and stays on for 2 to 3 seconds, so it gives you enough time to read time. And in a dark room, the light is quite dramatic coming from this Illuminator. In fact, you can use it to read things around you if you need to. You can use it as an emergency flashlight for short bursts of light, which is kind of a handy thing. Aesthetics. I think this watch has a really nice look to it. It looks like a more expensive watch, and it feels good on the wrist, well below, or well beyond, I guess, its modest price point. You'll notice it has the Casio Marlin on the case back, and there's also a small Casio Marlin on the dial. There used to be an earlier version of Casio dive watches. I believe it was called the Marlin. So I think that's probably where the Marlin logo comes from. The Super Illuminator function really lives up to its Super moniker. There's no excuse for not being able to read time in the dark with this watch. A couple of small pet peeves. As I already mentioned, the dome crystal does look nice, but it does introduce some distortion when you're trying to read time at an angle. Another pet peeve of mine on a lot of quartz watches is that they don't have the second hand lining up with the minute markers on the dial. You can see that it's off on most of the markers, and I've noticed that on a lot of analog quartz watches. I think it's hard to get the second hand registered on those minute markers and keep it registered over the life of the watch. Some companies do it and do it well, but I'd say that most don't. It's not a big deal, but it does tend to bug me a little bit. Overall, I think if you're looking for a budget diver and can find one of these watches, or if you're looking at a weekend beater watch to wear around and do errands and things on the weekends, this would be a perfect watch, especially if you prefer an analog quartz watch over something like a Casio G-Shock. Anyway, check out the MDV 102, and hopefully you enjoyed this review. Thanks.